Welcome to Tree Dog Tuesday, only on the Fueled by Joy Working Dog Podcast.
Hi everyone, Wade Graskowitz here, owner of Joy Pet Foods here in Illinois. Just want to reach out today and first of all, thank everybody that supports Joy Dog Food. We appreciate everything that every single customer for Joy does for us. We're still a small, family-owned pet food company, USA-made products, born and raised right here. Another reason I wanted to jump on here today is hunting season's in full swing, and this time of the year, you'll learn that, and I did too, if you start seeing your dog with no stamina, no energy, weight loss, issues with the hair and the coat, and, after 2 or 3 days, your dog just doesn't want to come out of the dog box. Guys, there's an issue. And I just want to challenge you guys, if you're not feeding Joy Dog Food, give us a try. I'm very confident that if you give us a try and you're feeding a product that you're not satisfied with or your dog's not satisfied with, once you try Joy Dog Food, you will not switch back. You won't. And if something happens and you're having issues, please pick up the phone and call 1-800-245-4125 and personally ask for me, Wade Graskowitz, the owner. And again, thank you very much for your support of Joy Dog Food.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fueled by Joy podcast. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. We have trapper, outdoorsman, retired conservation agent, Mr. Jim Palmer, man I've known since I was a little bitty kid. Mostly good. We've had... Jim, let's get started by the ticket you wrote me for shooting the goose with the rifle. Talk about a guy that really deserved a ticket. I was it.
Yeah, that was one of the last times my dad rode with me.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, because one thing, before we get into all the trapping and all the outdoor stuff, you've been a pillar of the community this whole time, too. I mean, you grew
well, I
up
appreciate
here.
that.
Well, I mean, you grew up here. You've been around this county forever. You were the conservation agent here for how long?
From 87 to 18.
So from 87 to 18, you were the conservation agent here. Miss Kim was my elementary school teacher. She was a principal, I believe a superintendent for a while too.
No, just principal.
Just a principal.
She went back to work over at Newtown and was principal over there for 2 years after
Yep.
she retired from Mercer.
And so here, my 5th grade or 6th grade teacher, and of course we're dumb kids. I mean, we're so stupid when we're young, and we do some of the dumbest stuff. But I always thought you did such a great job of, as I got older and wiser and realized how stupid I was when I was young, of separating your job from the things in the community and still being able to get along with everybody and bring everybody together and stuff. So I want to say I appreciate you for all the hard work and everything that you've done. I mean, I know I shoot this goose with a rifle like a moron, and I'm out there looking at it, and I look up and there you are leaning against my truck. And I thought, boy, of all the stupid things in the world to do, what are you doing out here, Michaelis?
Yeah, I've always said I'd hate to be judged on what I did at 17 for the rest of my life.
That's right, and we all did a bunch of stupid stuff. But I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for all the stuff you've done for the trapping community, for the outdoors, for even the schools. I remember you coming in and teaching discus and stuff at track practices and all that stuff. So known Jim for a long time. I'm glad to be sitting down here at his kitchen here in North Missouri. And Jim, let's just start with you. Let's just talk about your outdoor lifestyle and when that started. When did you start trapping? When did you start doing stuff outdoors and all that?
Well, my dad would take me out, and he had a beagle, and he'd hunt rabbits with his bow. Mm-hmm. And I'd go out and watch and listen and be part of it. We fished a lot. Didn't have many deer, didn't have any turkeys where I grew up in Illinois at the time. And really got into pheasant hunting and rabbit hunting and then trapping. There was a pond about maybe a mile from our house. Wasn't a lot of ponds in that part of the world like we got in North Missouri. But after I ate supper, I would walk out there and just sit and watch the muskrats swim around. And I pretty much had them pegged by the time season started. And I started during the fur boom. And
what year would that been?
75, I think.
Yeah. And when you talk about fur boom, what was everything bringing back then?
Oh, Lord. 30, 40 for raccoons, $80 for red fox. We didn't have too many coyotes then. Mostly red fox, mink. I can't really remember. I caught a few. Muskrats were $5, $6, $7.
Oof.
Even a possum would bring you $3 to $5.
No kidding.
And for a kid,
Yeah.
I was happy to catch a possum. That sort of changed later in my life. But and I remember the first beaver. We didn't have a lot of beavers. And I was amazed how big they were. I remember the first beaver my dad showed me were a colony. There was chew sticks in the ice, and there was a hut up on the bank. And I was just amazed because I'd only seen them on TV before, So I started doing that. Got into trapping hard. Didn't play basketball because we had an excellent basketball team, but they would practice before school and after, so I couldn't run traps.
Yeah.
So I didn't play basketball, football, and track.
You couldn't talk the coach into letting you just practice the late.
Not
the
Coach
late
Keller. And, decided early on, and trapping played a part in it. Season hadn't started, trapping season, and I was scouting, and I found somebody had set traps before season, and it caught some of the muskrats that I wanted to catch.
Really?
So I called the local game warden, who was the father of our school librarian, and Cecil came out, and I jumped in the rig, and we went out there, and I showed him, and he told me, he handed me a trap and a muskrat that was in the trap. He says, you hold on to this, and if I make an arrest, we'll use it as evidence. But that was, he was giving it to a kid.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that, and that was about the time I decided I wanted to be a game warden or conservation agent.
Did that first, when you get such a positive interaction with the game warden the first time as a young kid, I assume that played into, hey, these guys are pretty cool. I want to be that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You bet. That was a career choice. It was good. I can't complain about the ride. I do know that at the time, when I was in college, they actually had a meeting with all of us that were in the wildlife crew, and they told us that the odds of you getting a job in this career are not really good, so maybe you ought to think about changing your major.
Especially back then, because I think it's still pretty difficult now, if I'm not wrong, but back then it was almost impossible.
Well, when I got in, I think there was, let me get this right, like 1,200 people applied. They interviewed 160, and they hired 18 of us.
No kidding. So only 160 interviews out of 1,200. And only, that's a very difficult selection process.
Yeah.
What was it you think that kind of put you up above the rest, as far as getting that job?
I did an internship while I was in college, and I made myself available. I volunteered a lot. Some of the guys, something that wouldn't happen in today's world, I had a commission, and I did wildlife law enforcement. Wildlife gave me a truck to patrol in, and fisheries paid me while I was going to college.
Really?
In today's world, and
I say that don't sound like a bad gig.
Yeah, that was, and I spent, the internship was half the time with the local agent and the other half with the park ranger. And I had a message one day from the supervisor for the park rangers, and he told me, he said, you want a job this summer? So I was a park ranger for a summer down in the Ozarks, and then I worked fisheries, running shocker boats. That was one of those deals. Hey, you want to do this? Mm-hmm. I trapped cannon-netted turkeys and put transmitters on them and used the telemetry equipment to follow them around. And one thing I did learn then, I still find it fascinating. Some of those turkeys would move 10 miles from the timber down into the river bottoms,
really,
and eat the leftover grain and stuff. And then in the spring they'd filter back.
No
but
kidding.
Up to 10 miles that they would
I
move.
never dreamed they'd go that far, even down there.
So it was just making myself available. I did track in college, and I didn't do football because those guys are always in study groups and stuff, and I couldn't do all the volunteering that I did for the department. So,
well, for a guy that, because I'm kind of in the same situation. I love to run hounds, I love to compete with hounds, all that stuff, but doing the podcast, doing the video, covering the hunts, it really makes it to where I can't do that as much as I want. How did you balance? Because you wanted to trap, I assume.
I had difficult discussions with several supervisors that didn't want me trapping.
Yeah.
And, the fact was I'd get up at 4 a.m. and run traps till 7 or so, and then get cleaned up and go to work.
Yeah. Or
I'd carry my stuff with me in case I ran into something that I needed to take care of.
Yeah.
So being an agent's a lifestyle. It's not a job.
Was it a hard thing to get into at first, until you get the hang of it? Or was it something you took too quick and easy? Or was it difficult the first few months, years, whatever?
One of the nicest things, had the fellow that used to run our covert unit, did my background.
Yeah.
And I actually saw the file several years later after that. And he said, he likes enforcement and he's good at it. So I've never forgotten that.
Yeah. So you took to it quick and easy.
I took to it pretty quick. Well, I think if you're going to be a successful conservation officer, game warden, you have to have a background, and then you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. You know what to look for.
Yeah.
If you've never done those things before, I don't think you're going to be that effective.
Yeah. What, as far as conservation agents today, because, we listen podcasts, other stuff, when I'm not super familiar with that world, but a lot of the biologists, a lot of the game wardens and stuff are not necessarily outdoorsmen first and the game warden second, or biologists second. They didn't grow up in the same rural lifestyle, watching muskrats in the pond, and seeing their first beaver, and all that stuff like we did. Is that a problem, you think, now, or are these new wardens, new biologists, all that stuff just as good as everybody else?
I'm old school.
Yeah.
And it has changed.
Yeah.
It has changed. The fellow we had here for a little while, he told me he'd trapped, but he'd never caught a mink. So I said, well, I'll teach you how I do it. And I don't think he'd trap much.
You can tell. Yes, you can tell.
So, and not that, a lot of the guys that I came up through the ranks with were duck hunters. Mm-hmm. And a few guys were hound guys.
Yeah.
A few guys were trappers, several upland hunters. But the hounds really, it's hard. I couldn't do it. I couldn't run hounds because hounds go where hounds want to go.
Yeah.
And if you're the conservation agent, you have to be very...
Yes. You can't be sneaking into your neighbor's place at 2 a.m. trying to get your dog off a tree in their yard or something like that. That would not be a very good look. And not that we do that. But back then, you look now just in this county, you think of me, Zane Allen, Mike Noe, my brother, every now and then. There's not as many houndsmen now as there was back especially in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, you had to be Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're kind of outlaws as a group, especially back then. I mean, you really had to be out there at night, policing the houndsmen. You had to be in the daytime policing the deer hunters, turkey hunters, all that stuff. You surely didn't get much sleep back then.
There was times, it's a young man's game.
Yeah.
It really is. There was a reason why the guys that had been on for a while were supervisors.
Yeah.
They got their desk jobs
Yeah.
because they were tired of being out at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah. And when you think of like just overall raccoon numbers, now back then it wasn't the coons that we have today. It wasn't even close. And so that was a resource. Those were valuable animals. They weren't necessarily considered a nuisance like they are now. The crop damage wasn't big. They weren't everywhere, getting into chicken coops and stuff, So that was something that really had to be regulated more so than today.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The good and the bad. The bad is when stuff gets valuable monetarily, people cheat. It's just human nature.
Yep.
I think the guys that are doing it now are doing it for the love of the dogs and the chase and the music. And the guys that did it for money they're gone.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And it's the same way with trapping.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah,
you bet.
I mean,
there's no money. The only way you could make money now is somebody pays you to trap stuff.
Yeah.
Gas is so expensive. I just looked the other day. I pulled up some old sales slips when I shipped stuff to the big fur auctions. And, it wasn't terribly long ago, 12 years ago maybe, 14 at the most. I had $40 coons at the big auctions.
Yeah, I think 2013, that was the last year I trapped with any kind of gusto because, I was averaging 22.50 green down at Solomon's. And I didn't have to flesh stretch nothing. I was selling every Tuesday because they would stay open late on Tuesday. So I would skin my coons from that day in the parking lot and take them in there and sell them then because I just knew there's no way this could last, and it didn't. I mean, it wasn't. No. And that was just 12 years ago.
We had a good beaver market for a few years. It's scaled back quite a bit now. And one of the reasons I'd heard was because of the popularity of Yellowstone, the TV show, to make the
hats,
to make the cowboy hats, to make the felt hats. For some reason, skunks are really valuable right now.
Is that an essence thing, or is it?
Well, the essence has actually gone down in value, but the muzzleloader guys, the reenactors and stuff, the craft market it's referred to. And I also heard that in the Jewish faith, a hat that they wear is made from skunks.
Really?
They'd rather use skunk than any other fur. And so that's where I heard one of the biggest private buyers in the United States right now. That's where his skunks went. But North Bay, Ontario, just finished up an auction. And there was, I think they averaged over $70 a pelt for skunks.
Nuh-uh.
Yes. They said 2 guys got into a bidding war.
Really?
And they didn't like each other.
Some trappers were very happy, I bet, about that bidding war.
They'd been up enough that guys started putting them up.
Yeah.
And then those guys that put them up raked it in this year.
That's crazy. But how do you foresee? I mean,
you can't
foresee that.
No.
You're just happy. And who knows how many skunks they didn't skin that they should have, that they could have went up there and made $70 a piece off of, or 50 or whatever.
It was crazy. I've seen on some of the trapping sites after the sale auction results came out. It shows a kid with 3 skunks. I know what I got.
Yeah, there you go. But the fur market is such a... Because the fur market really does dictate trapper numbers. You think of 2013, and I think Solomon made more selling dog proofs than he did. I know he made more selling dog proofs than he did buying hides. You couldn't go, a dry ditch would be full of marshmallows and dog proofs everywhere down the road and stuff like that. And people were trapping that I never dreamed would have ever ran a trap. But then 2014, they cut that in half. 2015, they're gone. I don't see. I spend just as much time in the creeks of North Missouri, in November as anybody, and I just don't see any traps anymore.
No. There's very few guys. Last year, Missouri sold about 9,700 trapping licenses.
Yeah.
And I was just doing some research before I did another program. And back in the 30s and 40s, they were throwing out numbers of like 75,000 trappers in the state.
Yeah. And of those 9,700 that bought last year, how many of them were like me that seen, I'm hunting one night in late summer and I see a litter of kitten bobcats in a brush pile. I buy my trapping license to go set them bobcats for a week, and then I pull my traps and I'm done. I never laid another set of steel again. There's a lot of that. A good portion of those 9,700 maybe didn't put a trap in the ground or trapped for just a very minimal amount of time too.
I think what we're seeing is the trappers that did it for money, they're leaving.
Yeah.
But now the thing is taking these egg eaters out.
Yeah.
And that has filled the place that the guys left.
Yeah.
So we're picking up a new clientele as far as the reason why they're trapping.
Yeah. And let's talk about the importance of trapping in conservation, because to me, as far as a mesos predator like a coyote, skunk, coon, possum, there's no more effective way than trapping. I mean, other than poison, which is completely illegal and detrimental in other ways. But trapping is probably the most important conservation tool that we have here in North Missouri. Am I wrong?
No. You're exactly right. For common fur bearers, some species, it's still driven by the trophy. I'd say bobcats, and they're one of the highest return for money.
Right.
But it's still not. You're not going to be able to take your wife to the Bahamas.
No.
On your fur check.
No, definitely not. If you did, you caught a lot of bobcats.
So, but it's really the most effective way. And I looked at something put out by Fish and Wildlife agencies. There's a big report. They do it every couple of years. And they'll interview trappers, a questionnaire from each state. And they'll break down. Anyway, trappers in the Midwest, 61% of them use the dog proofs if they're after raccoons.
Yep.
And then it probably goes the number 1.5 double coil, cage trap. And we'll get into it here in a little bit, but the 220 is further down the line, even in states where you can use them.
Yeah. Again, I do want to talk about that because the sense of using a 220 in a case over something like a dog proof or even a 1.5 or whatever, we'll get into that. Yeah. But the Missouri Department of Conservation, I'm in the minority amongst what I would say are most houndsmen. Then I'm a proponent of what the MDC does a vast majority of the time. I get to, luckily with my job, I get to hunt in so many other states, from Texas, Kentucky, out east, Nebraska, Kansas, everywhere around. And we have an abundance of public ground. We have reasonable permit prices. We have all kinds of opportunity for people to hunt, all kinds of game, small game, large game, whatever, throughout the year. And I think that the trappers and the houndsmen and stuff, they kind of give the MDC a hard knock. Maybe they don't look at them that way, the same way that I do. But if we're looking at how you feel, you're a former MDC employee, and now you're here, you're retired, you're an outdoorsman and stuff. Generally, overall, where is Missouri as far as an outdoor state, and the things that we can do and how we can enjoy the outdoors and how it's governed?
I've trapped in 13 or 14 states and one native nation. And some states, I was bear trapping in Maine. And at that time, you could only set 2 sets out, and the limit was 1 bear. Well, it didn't take long to run your traps.
Yeah.
And so I got a fishing license. There's all kinds of lakes up there. but it's not. There's not maps where you park like we have here, and this lake might have a different regulation than this lake, and there's just a little portage between the two. And I was so confused. There's places I wouldn't fish because I wasn't sure whether I was doing it right or not because it was too complicated. Missouri has pretty simple regulations compared to a lot of states, especially their big game stuff.
Yeah.
Especially big game. Even stuff the guys are running with hounds, the mountain lions and bears, they'll have mortality quotas and units can shut down overnight.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty easy to get along with here, I think.
I hunt a lot of public ground all over the country. As a resident or even a non-resident, I can pull into any conservation area. I don't have to pay an extra fee. I can pull my camper in there in a camping spot. I can turn my dogs loose. I can walk all over it. I can do whatever I want on it. I can treat it like it's my own. And then I can clean up my mess and be gone. And never have to talk to anybody, never break a law, never nothing. There aren't very many Midwestern states or states, period, that you can do that in.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So when you talked about bear hunting or trapping bears in Maine, what animals have you caught out of the norm in other areas of the United States and beyond?
I've got, you name it. There was a book printed out of Ontario, Canada in the mid-'80s. It was Wild Fur Bear Management and Conservation in North America. Sucker weighs like 12 pounds.
Yeah.
It had all these species listed and all the research that was done on those species at that time.
What year would that have come out?
85 or 86.
So it's pretty recent, fairly recent.
Yeah, and they're coming out with a new one now that's updated, but it's not going to be a book. It's online.
Yeah. And
they keep adding chapters to it. But anyway, back then, what I did is I looked at the table of contents and I took the species out that didn't have a trapping season anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that you could harvest by trapping methods, those I put on my list. And this last January, I caught my last species. So I've taken you could call it the grand slam of trapping in North America.
What was your last species?
It was a white-nosed coati.
Really? Where was that at?
I was about 18 miles north of the Mexico border in Arizona.
Yeah. How do you catch a white-nosed coati?
Well, they're related to raccoons.
Yeah.
And so they're omnivores. And they reminded me of turkeys. The females and the young of the year will run in groups. Mm-hmm. And the males, they're mostly solitary. I know our turkeys will, be 2, 3, 4, 5 gobblers together. But the hens and the poults go off and do their own thing. And and there's a lot of rock and stuff, so tracking is not good. But I did, and I talked to hunters that were hunting cow's deer there. And I'd done a lot of research. I bought books. I researched the heck out of stuff before I go because I don't have the money to repeat the trips. I got to be successful if I'm going to do it. And so I actually would look up what they fed coatis in zoos that had them and stuff, what were their preferred foods and stuff. Anyway, what I ended up doing is you got to use cage traps in Arizona if you're on public land. Yeah. No foot traps. Yeah. And so I had those. I had collapsible ones that I bought. Pricey, but a lot easier to manage.
Around,
And so I had some shellfish oil, but I also had, they like to eat the fruits off prickly pear cactus. So I had some syrup from that. Mm-hmm. And then banana fragrance. And then I used mostly some dry cat food with some other things mixed in. They liked marshmallows, so I found marshmallows that were shaped like worms.
Yeah.
Not the basic marshmallow. and because they dig around and they eat scorpions and
Yeah.
snakes and stuff like that. So anyway, on day 6 I caught one, and the limit's 1 a year.
Really? So there's not a whole lot of them down there.
In areas there are, but they're
Yeah.
sort of nomadic. It was interesting. There was a couple from Alberta, Canada, that had come down to hunt quail for a month, and we were staying near each other, so we'd check in. And anyway, I told them I'd caught the coati, and they had me bring it over. And then there was a guy that lived there, year-round resident, and I pulled it and showed him, and he goes, "They do exist." So, but the coolest part about that trip, and I've been there on another trip, every once in a while a jaguar come through.
Yeah.
And just knowing that you're walking the same area that
Yeah.
a jaguar might have was pretty cool.
That is cool. And that's, of course, as a houndsman, and because one will get treed on occasion, down in that area, and it is just like, man, what I wouldn't give to be just running some lion dogs and getting there at a bay or at a tree, and there's a jaguar up there. I mean, how freaking cool would that be?
I went up, go back to Maine. I'd caught a couple bears on different trips, and then I asked some high school buddies. I said, "Let's go up and run them with hounds."
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, you can't bring your own hounds. You got to get a guide.
Yeah.
And at any rate, we drew cards. There's 3 of us, and that's who shot first.
Yeah.
And tree this bear, and Paul shoots it out. And I shot a fair number of coons out of trees and squirrels, but when a bear falls out of the tree and hits the ground, you know it.
That's right. They make a louder noise.
They do.
That's interesting. I've never been to Maine bear hunting. I've been to Wisconsin. I've been lion hunting down in northeast New Mexico with Shorty. That was a lot of fun. But trappers and houndsmen are not as far apart as what people think.
No.
We're usually chasing the same species.
Uh-huh. I agree.
You're up there trapping for bear and then hunting for bear with hounds. No different than, I don't know what the New Mexico trapping regulations are, but I mean, you could have been laying steel for mountain lions the whole time we're trying to tree them with hounds and everything. So we're a lot closer than people think. And we're also, when people look down on a form of sporting and shooting and hunting, it's usually trappers and houndsmen that are right there together too. Not very many people like us.
I'll go with that, and then I'll also look at mom and dad. My parents lived out in the state of Wyoming for a while, and the purest trout fishermen look down on the.
Yes.
And I learned the locals will just thread a night crawler on a hook and throw it out.
Yeah.
And
Throwing
that's
a rooster tail out there, just pulling trout in.
and it works,
Yeah.
but you have the elitist attitude
Yeah.
sometimes.
And a lot of that attitude comes from an unfamiliarity. As a guy that grew up trapping with my Uncle Tim and my grandfather and all that stuff, and I'm a mediocre trapper at best, probably not even mediocre. But I know enough about it to know the importance of it, the ethics of it, all that stuff. You've been hunting with hounds enough to know the same way on our end. And we're going to talk about this new regulation coming up in Missouri here pretty quick that's affecting both groups. But trappers and houndsmen, to me, are about the same type of people.
Agreed.
When you're talking to a fellow trapper and I'm talking to a fellow houndsman, a lot of them do both. A lot of them are the same breed of people. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we shouldn't be fighting amongst each other. That's a thing that I always wanted to talk about on this podcast too. And here is an opportunity with this bill, and it's getting ready to come up in front of the Conservation Commission for trappers and hunters and houndsmen to kind of unite and maybe for a common cause. And let's real quick, I want to get into some more game warden stuff after we talk about this and some more trapping stuff, but let's just go through the ins and outs of what that consists of, that's coming in front of the Conservation Commission.
Well, in one of our commissioners who's now off the commission, he will be in July, he'll be replaced. His goal was to allow trappers to use 220s on dry ground and lethal snares on dry ground during the regular fur trapping season. And you would think an organization like the Missouri Trappers would think that would be great. You know, another tool in our tool, you know. But no. The guys that have been around since the fur boom knew the problems catching domestic animals. Whether it's beagles like I've always had my whole life. I had Australian walkers there for a while. And had some Finley River Joe in it.
Yep, there you go.
And but the Missouri Trappers Association has come out against what the commissioner had proposed. There was 3 of us that went down to the commission meeting, and we didn't know about it until 4 days before, and it takes 5 days before you can be put to speak. So we weren't allowed to speak.
Yeah.
That will change at the next commission meeting. And the commissioner that pushed it, something I've learned about the Conservation Commission that I understand, but it still disappoints me, is they will have figured out how the way they're going to vote before they actually vote. It's always 4-0.
Yeah.
And I went to another meeting, say a year ago at the commission meeting, and I had 2 of the commissioners tell me they didn't know anything about trapping, but they followed the one commissioner who was pushing some stuff. And there was a preliminary vote, 4-0, to proceed with this regulation change that allows 7x7 conibears. There's some other stipulations that make a little sense, but still haven't been well thought out.
Right.
This regulation has all kinds of problems. And they will vote on it, yay or nay, in the September commission meeting. But the July meeting, we're already loading our guns for it.
Yep.
And the reason is because we have enough tools. Most of us have hunting dogs. We don't want to catch anybody's dog or cat. The worst thing you can do is catch somebody's pet or a valuable hound. And something I mentioned about it too, I said, you know, if you catch and kill somebody's $5,000 dog, you may be civilly liable for that. And if you're following the law to a T, you probably won't be. But you break is there any law that you broke and you catch somebody's hound? And another thing that I've brought up is, you know, when the fur boom was going, everybody wanted to kill as many coon as they could. But you know what? The guys that are trapping for egg eater control, they're wanting to kill as many coon possible too. And the negative effects for everybody involved are the same if you catch somebody's dog, whether the market's high or low. And so it seems contrary that a trapper organization would be against this, but we are vehemently against this.
Well, when you think about catching a domestic animal, a pet, a valuable hunting dog, working dog, whatever, we talked earlier about how houndsmen and trappers are kind of on the forefront of, you know, people that don't understand our sport and our lifestyle, and it's cruel, it's inhumane, it's all this thing. How's that going to look if some 220's got a little Shih Tzu wrapped up in it?
Well,
that would be terrible for not only the individual, but for the trapping community and the publicity, especially now with social media and all those things. How that can come forward and just make trappers look even worse when we're not, you know.
I agree. We've this morning I actually got on the computer and I Googled domestic animals in conibear traps, and I came up with 178 examples. Now, some of those were good because some trapper organizations are actually having workshops to show people how to turn their animals loose out of a trap. But unfortunately, catching a domestic animal in a foot trap is completely different than one of these conibears.
Yes. Let's talk about the difference between. Let's talk about the tools that the trapper has. A target species. It's coyotes, coons, skunks, possums right now. That's what everybody's worried about on the conservation side. You know, the deer hunters want the coyote hunters. The coyotes gone. The turkey hunters and the quail hunters, the pheasant hunters, they want the egg eaters gone. So with those species, let's figure what tools do you have, and how would a 220 on dry ground and a lethal snare be better for any reason than what you have available now?
I don't see how it's a positive any way you look at it for us. Missouri is a dog state. Mm-hmm. It's always been a dog state. And when we got the cable restraint regulations through, we worked with the hounds people. Right. And we had a working group. And we came up with things that everybody could agree with. This will throw everything out the window. And whether you, like I used to teach in hunter ed, if you accidentally shoot somebody, no matter how many times you say you're sorry, it doesn't change the fact.
Yeah.
You catch somebody's dog, it doesn't change the fact. And Missouri does not require trapper education to set a trap. And
it doesn't require a cable restraint class anymore either, does
correct.
it? No.
Correct.
I don't think it did.
You just buy your permit and you go.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is, since education is not required, only about a quarter of the trappers in Missouri have been through any kind of trapper education. And we hate the thought of inexperienced trappers being handed lethal tools and going out and experimenting.
Yeah. We don't get to do that with a firearm.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's talk real quick about the difference between a cable restraint, which has been legal in Missouri since 2010, something like that.
Oh, earlier than that.
Earlier than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a difference between a cable restraint and a lethal snare.
Well, cable restraint is used just to hold the animal, and there's locks that slide on your cable restraint. And the cable restraint regulations say that it has to be a relaxing lock, meaning it'll quit exerting pressure when the animal quits fighting it. Mm-hmm. It's readily accepted that if a dog's been on leash before or tied up at any time, if he can't leave, he'll just sit and wait for somebody to come get him.
Yep.
And the lethal snares will work almost in the same way, but the lock keeps tightening down, and then you get a lethal result in just a few minutes.
What about the efficacy, just from a pure trapping standpoint? Say there are no dogs on the planet. You had a cable restraint, you got a snare. What are your catch odds going to go up just because you used a lethal snare over a cable restraint?
Actually, they're probably going to be less effective on the positive side in this proposed regulation. They say you can't set one of these within 150 feet of a road or an adjoining landowner.
Yep.
So you're required to get permission from that adjoining landowner before you could set those, which seems odd to me.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was written. I don't know who wrote it, but there's several things in it that I can shoot holes in of how it's worded and how it's going to be enforced as an ex-conservation agent.
Yeah.
I read those things with those years of working.
Right.
So if you go to like a trapping supply catalog and you can buy parts to make your own cable restraints or snares, they will, if they're reputable at all, they will say this is relaxing and this is a non-relaxing lock. You're required to have an anchor swivel, and we'll show that when you videotape a little bit, because I've got an example or two back here. What I would do if this thing passes, and even if it doesn't, there's still guys that are going to legally set these things.
Yep.
And if I was out and about quite a bit and I had a hound that I cared about, I would have cable cutters with me.
Yep.
They're not very big. You'd think that like lineman pliers and stuff would cut that, but they just sort of grind it and smash it. You got to have special cutters. Mid to low 20s for price. It's a lot cheaper than losing a dog.
I know a lot of the upland guys carry those with
you
them.
Bet. Yeah. You bet. And then those, and then for a conibear, we'll jump to a conibear, carry a piece of rope with you. Mm-hmm. And I always put a loop that'll go around my boot. Yeah. I make mine adjustable because if you're wearing heavy boots, it's cold, your loop may not be the right size for it. And so you loop it and then you run it through the eyes of the spring and you just pull and you can, but if you had a dog fighting you, I could just, it'd be a rodeo.
Yeah, and a 220's very efficient. And they have their place. A 220 is a fantastic tool, for otter, beaver, things that live underwater. I'm not knocking the actual trap, but if you're caught in a 220, if your hound is caught in a 220, you're probably not going to get there in time. I mean, the odds of you getting there in time have got to be 1 in 1,000.
Yeah, it's not very good. Yeah. The one thing I'd like to say to your audience about something to think about is if this becomes legal, a popular method for catching raccoons in other states with the 220s is cutting slots in 4 or 5 gallon buckets, throwing food in the back and sliding the trap in the front. If you feed your dog using a 5 gallon bucket, they're more likely to stick their heads in something like that. So just something to think about.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 220 and the bucket sets and the ways that it can be used and stuff. And because cable restraints and snares, that's one thing. But to lug a 220 around in a 5 gallon bucket to catch a coon, when you can get a dog proof and stab it in the ground in half the time with a tenth of the weight, tenth of the bulk, what sense does a 220 make on dry ground?
It doesn't to me.
No.
The best tool to catch a lot of raccoons is that dog proof.
Yeah.
And then the second one is probably a 1.5 double coil. Mm-hmm. When I was trapping a lot of coons, I'd use number 11s, which is a number 1 muskrat trap with an extra spring on it.
Yep.
I like those.
Yep.
I still do.
Yep. So that's another thing about this proposed bill and stuff is that we already have the tools available to catch all the target species in all of the state of Missouri. Non-lethal. We can do that to non-lethal with dogs. Why? I mean, I don't understand why we would put a lethal set out there when it's not necessary.
Well, at one time before I moved to Missouri in '83, and so I've been around forever, like you said. But prior to that, 220s were legal on dry ground. Mm-hmm. And what's the reason we lost that? It's because people were setting them in areas they shouldn't have and were killing domestic animals. Yep. At no time in our history do I think that lethal snares have been legal except for doing damage work like around a sheep pen or something like that. But the 220 was legal at one time, and it was abused enough that it was taken away.
And so I can't see how that would change today versus 83 or whenever.
And the sad thing is if it would become legal again, people are going to do it just because they can.
Yeah. And people with a lot less knowledge on its use and how to use it, how to go about catching what you want to catch with it. I mean, how many great trappers? You just said there's only 9,700 trappers in the state. I mean, how many of them really know what they're doing?
Well, it's the one thing about those dog proofs is you can go from 0 to 100 in about a minute.
Yeah. They're a great tool for kids, for guys starting out trapping, for guys that are wanting to do nuisance control. Especially, you got too many raccoons in your place, stab a bunch of dog proofs around your sweet corn patch, and it's a easy peasy lemon squeezy. You're gonna catch them. Yep. They're not hard to catch. They're not a hard animal to catch. That's not a hard trap to set. I would much rather carry around a bucket of those than two 220s, which would fit in the same bucket.
There's no upside as far as the trappers are concerned.
Yeah.
The Missouri Trappers Association, like you talked about earlier, one person does that, we all get black eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I couldn't blame somebody that put all the time and effort in getting a dog to run and tree and all the things that goes into running dogs, and to have to lose that dog because of somebody doing something stupid.
And I've always said on this podcast, it's important that we keep our dogs where they're supposed to be, do all the things that we're supposed to do. But even if a dog ventures onto another property it does not have permission on, there are rules in place and laws in place to take care of that don't require the dog dying.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
You know, just take your ticket, go through the process, and just be happy you still got your animal. And I mean, I look at it no different than if somebody's cattle got out. I'm not going to set, traps that'll kill a cow,
Or shoot them.
Yes, exactly. So, no, it's an interesting take, and I feel like the Missouri Conservation Commission is got a lot of pluses. We do not want to leave scientific, biological, environmental things to, the people of Missouri on an open vote. That's not a good process. That's never worked good at anywhere in any state where that's ever been done. And so it does it. It's good. It's a good setup and everything. But I feel like you said, there's commissioners that probably have not done a lot of trapping.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and they're political appointees, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, right. And they freely admitted face to face to me, 2 of them did, that they didn't know anything about it, and we would hope that they would listen to somebody that knows more about it.
Yes,
but we'll find out.
Yeah, we will.
The commissioner who pushed this, like I said, he'll be off. And he'll have a replacement by the time there's a vote for this.
Yeah.
So that's why we're pushing it. We've got one trapper that posts on every trap site in the United States, I think, and he's supporting this thing all to the hilt. And
what's his reasoning behind that?
His point of view is landowners being able to manage their properties. And I get that to a certain point, but like what we've talked about a couple times in this conversation is we already have the tools.
Yes.
We already have the ability. There's no need to fight about it.
Yeah.
There's no use to, and it's interesting, even in the Trappers Association, there's people that don't agree with the stance of the organization. And you know what? Most of those guys are young.
Yeah.
The old guys that have been through the fur boom and all the hassles and the headaches and the bad publicity of catching a domestic animal, they don't want any part of this.
Yeah. I can't see why anybody would. I'm fairly young. I went through one fur boom, I guess, but not that one. And I'm not a full-time trapper, and I'm one of those guys that traps for money, and then the minute they're not worth anything, I'm just like those other guys, and I don't put any steel on the ground, and I'm done. But even for that, we have all the tools. Dog proofs are the best way to get rid of coons on your deer hunting property. They're the best way to get rid of a lot of things. Foothold traps are way better for skunks, possums, all that stuff.
Or smaller conibears.
Yes, or small conibears, yeah. A 110, a 155 even. A 155 is not going to be lethal on a dog very often. It'd have to be a pretty small dog. And so, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me, just like it doesn't you.
The one thing that we haven't talked about that I want to is the comment period. The way Missouri conservation laws work is the commission votes to look into something, to send it forward. And then there's a comment period, which is 30 days in length. And the one thing I have found when sitting in on their meetings is they pay attention to the numbers of people that make comments
Good.
for and against.
Good.
That's very important to them,
Yeah.
the PR aspect of that. And so I'm asking the Hound guys or anybody else listening to this period will be July 2nd through the end of the month,
Yep.
so the 31st. And I just got on the Missouri Department of Conservation website this morning and looked it up. You can't even open up that now.
Yeah.
But I wrote it down here. When you get into the MDC site, up on the right-hand part of the screen, there's a contact and engage page.
Yep.
Click on that, and it'll take you down, and you can get to public commenting. And let them know what you think. If you think it's a good deal, I guess
Yeah.
that's your privilege. But if you
Everybody
don't,
has the right to be wrong.
yeah. And I've been there.
Yes, I have to.
I've got a wife that will tell you that. But you can do that. You can email the Department of Conservation. You can call them on the phone. I just think it's probably best to do it during the comment period.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm going to do it.
Yep. Yep.
And just let them know it. You can go on as long as you want, the reasons why, or just tell them this is not a good idea. We don't want it.
And be specific, because this is wrapped up in with some other stuff, with some thermal laws, with some things like that. That I'm not neither for nor against. That's not something I partake in, and not something I claim to be an expert in. But make sure you're specific in your comments about the trapping portion of this, why 220s and lethal snares are not a good idea, and all that stuff when they make that comment.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. So, that I think I've explained our position. Now, I'm one of the representatives for the Trappers Association. I am I'm their ethics chairman now. I'll probably be their conservation director after the vote in September.
Yeah.
So I'll be heavily involved in all this stuff as much as I can.
And I know the Sporting Dog Association has the same stance. With the Trappers Association, we've come together for this, and like we should, being like-minded folks. But yeah, it's important. It's good to know that the commissioners do look at the volume of comments and then look at the comments and stuff like that, because a lot of people, it's like, oh, nobody's ever going to see this, but maybe I won't do it because they're not going to pay any attention anyway. But it's good to know that they do.
They do. I was a little disappointed when they asked how many members, the one meeting I went to that we could talk, they asked how many members in the Missouri Trappers Association. And we're about 840, I think, right about now, give or take a couple. And you could see the commissioners just like, that's not enough people for us to pay attention to. And we're thinking we've got to have several thousand people.
Okay. Well, there you go.
And I'm going to have my wife do it.
Yeah. No. And I don't think I'm a member. I'm glad you brought that up, because I will be very shortly, as well as my kids, everything. We'll get them all in there for sure. If anybody's listening to this, make sure and join the Missouri Trappers Association, get those numbers up. And it's a good organization to be a part of, even despite this too.
Sure. We're doing it. Every district in the state, we have some education going on at least once a year. Some districts have twice, even 3 times a year sometimes. We have a spring meeting is a business meeting, but the fall meeting, there'll be guys selling stuff. There'll be guys selling stuff for dog hunters too there. Yep. And traps, books, videos. There'll be demonstrations by guys that know what they're talking about.
Yep. A lot of these dog hunters still like to put up fur. All the good stuff to do that with will be down there.
Yep, you bet. You bet. And this year it's going to be in Salem, third weekend of September, same weekend as Calamity Jane here.
Yep.
And but it moves around, and we're going to have a new president after this next election, and he's mentioned it more than once that maybe we ought to just alternate. Right now it's done, you have one district take it over.
Yeah.
And the new president, I think his feelings are southern Missouri one year, northern Missouri the next. Like pretty much have it in the same spot and just alternate. So, but I don't know how that's going to play out.
No, that's good. It's good for everybody to be aware. It's good for the trappers and the houndsmen to get together on this. Before we get done with this, Jim, I want to ask you 2 questions. What is your wildest game warden story, and what's your wildest trapping story? Over all your years of being a game warden, other than the time you caught this idiot shooting a goose.
See, I never brought that up.
I don't mind. The statute of limitations is up now, even if I didn't get caught shortly. But you did. You were right there, Johnny, on the spot.
It was bad luck for you, good luck for me that day. That's
right.
That's what it came down to. I've been fortunate to trap everywhere. I mean, I've been to the most northern point in the United States and trap Arctic fox.
Yeah.
I've seen wild polar bears. I've been in the Louisiana bayous for trapping nutria and watched the alligators swimming around and stuff. Yeah. But every time I catch a new species, I'd sit there and I'd go, well, I'll be danged. All the work and planning and stuff, and then all of a sudden it's real.
Yeah.
But I'd say that one of the craziest times trapping, my dad was a cattle buyer, and some people that ran the Galesburg sale barn had some strip mines back in Illinois. And I could duck hunt it and trap it. Mm-hmm. And some beaver showed up, and we're living there. And those strip mine pits, they're deep.
Yeah.
There's no slope on the bank. They'll just drop right off. And I had chest waders on, and I'm straddling this deep run. And my friend's on the bank, and I feel a beaver comes out and swims right between my legs and rubs both insides of the thighs and swims right through me. And I'm like almost going over my chest waders. And I'm, Emmett, help me get out of here.
Abandoned ship, you'd had enough. You just get out of there.
But that feeling, and you couldn't go anywhere because you were going to go swimming if you leaned back over. And game word stories.
You got to have one good one. Surely something stands out.
God, there's a lot of them. I had one down in the. I used to go down. I wasn't stuck in Mercer County.
Yeah.
I worked all over, and I would go down and work trout fishermen at Bennett Springs opening weekend every year. And I was out of uniform. We would just sit and watch people and take notes. It was pretty boring work, really.
Yeah.
Wasn't anything flashy about it. Well, anyway, there's what they call the Susie hole. There's a curve there, and there's a deep hole on the outside. And early in the trout season, the spring is pretty much the same temperature as the river. Mm-hmm. So the smallmouth and the goggle eye and stuff are up in the springs. And this one guy's just catching goggle eye out to wazoo. He's flipping them in back. He's not trying to hide it or nothing. No. And finally I just go, that guy just didn't know any better. I said, I'll go down and say something to him. So I was dressed up like a fisherman, and I just walked down. I said, doing some good. Yeah. I said, I think there's a limit on those things. And he thanked me, and I went back, and he just kept throwing them in the basket. And finally, I waited till he took the basket out of the water and went up to his vehicle, and I called the uniform guy. I said, come get this guy. And I remember that. I remember guys having, they had a boom box. This dates me, too. Mm-hmm. And where they were staying, they were catching over limits of trout. Some of those guys are really sneaky. Yeah. Because they'll be fishing with a buddy, and they bring a trout in, but they'll reach underwater and grab their buddy's stringer and string that trout. And anyway, there's boom box, and I looked over there, and all the batteries are out of it. I'm like, and there's no there's no plug into it. And I'm like, well, that's sort of weird. So I walked over, and we were doing a search on the trout, and I popped the back off that, and it was full of dope. So
They should have had their batteries in it.
they should have had their batteries in it. I got a man of the cloth one time. And
Really?
And I'm writing him a ticket. And I don't even remember what it was for. It was a deer violation.
Yeah.
It was something I couldn't. Anyway, then he started crying and wondered if God would forgive him. And talk about being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Say God will, but the state of Missouri don't care. You're in trouble.
All kinds of. Oh, I had one up by Cleopatra in Mercer County, and myself, a fellow out of Jefferson City, and my supervisor were out pheasant hunting, and we see this little Jeep drive down the road, and they pot this rooster pheasant out of the Jeep. Mm-hmm. So we're like, oh, okay, so we go get him stopped, and limits 2 rooster pheasants, always has been.
Yeah. Still is.
And this fella's driving the Jeep, and he's got a little boy. Little boy's 7, 8 years old. He just wants to be helpful,
Oh yeah.
and said, "You got any other birds in there?" "Yeah, I got this one." And then his boy from the back seat goes, "Do you want the other one too, Dad?"
Yeah, don't take your kid if you're going to be over the limit of anything. Mine would rat me out in a heartbeat, I promise you.
So, yeah, I could probably go on for hours if I thought about all the crazy stuff.
Well, you're going to have to take some notes. We're going to have to come back here and do this again sometime.
Yeah,
for sure.
Be fine.
I had fun. We're going to go down. We're going to get some pictures that'll go along with this podcast when we do it on the Cane Stream. Video of that rope with that 220, all that stuff. Jim, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, sitting down with me. I had a good time, good conversation. Remember, everybody, look up, get on the Missouri Trappers Association, be a member. That's going to be important. The Missouri Sporting Dog Association as well. Even if you don't have sporting dogs or don't have traps, it's good to get the numbers up so we can fight some of the stuff we need to fight.
We're all in it together.
That's right. That's right. You got anything to add before we shut it off, Jim?
No. We'll show some pictures. I'll show you how I set the springs on a conibear.
Yep.
And then I've got I've got a cable restraint, and I've also got a kill snare.
Perfect. All right. We'll get this shut off. We'll go get them pictures done. We'll run those pictures, videos, whatever throughout this podcast, and everybody can see it while they're listening.